The dawn of civilization. Primitive. Dangerous. Exciting. The handwriting is on the wall. If the human race is ever going to amount to anything, it needs
the most civilized caveman I have ever seen.
Look who's come out of his cave.
You know, the stuffy nose thing going on, and I'm like, I better not have COVID. Like, oh, it's gonna kill me. I friggin', because I was like a little bit away from getting, I don't know, the vaccination. So now my boss was like, I told him, I'm like, look, dude, I got this, and this. He's like, yeah, you gotta go get a COVID test, bud. Don't, no work for you. So I was just spent all day like sleeping. I was like, oh.
Well, I hope you feel better. That sucked.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do. It's just like,
just sleep a lot and drink a lot of like water and take vitamins, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's all I've been doing. I drank a whole bunch of tea, ate vitamins, and then I have been using the Zicam nose swabs. So it's like I don't know, a little something you rub in your nose and it feels good.
Okay. Yeah, I had to switch to the first input on my interface, and I.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome.
Hi.
We did have one guest who took a smoke break every 40 minutes, so we had to keep cutting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever listened to the Halloweenies podcast, but I edit that, and sometimes they'll just go off on tangents, and other times they'll say like and about 20 times in one sentence. And when I'm recording something, because I used to edit a Nine Inch Nails podcast, and I was on one episode, and I was very conscious about not doing that. I would take a pause if I needed to, because that's a lot easier to edit out than someone going, yeah, you know, and then
right.
So yeah, I'm familiar with this process.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again today for another episode of Cave Dweller Podcast. We have Mae Shults, also known as Everson Poe, here today with us to talk about some of their extensive catalog of music that they put out in the last few years. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
We've been listening to your music for a little while now, and as you know, I'm a big fan. I've written a couple of reviews for your releases over the past probably 6 months.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
It's no problem at all. Like I said, huge fan. Your album, Rituals, is actually in my top 10 albums of last year. So
that
makes
me feel so good.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, absolutely.
And for those listening out there, there is an album that's about to drop. What was the release date of the new album?
It comes out Friday, April 2nd. So as of this recording, in 2 days.
Great. So it'll probably be out before this is. So make sure you check that one out. You can find it on the Bandcamp for the page, or you can find it through Trepanation Recordings. It's titled Grief. So before we get into the albums too much, did you want to just sort of tell the audience what you do and what your music's about?
Sure. I've been releasing music as Everson Poe for almost 12 years. My first album came out in September 2009. I actually have lost track of how many albums I've put out. Yeah,
there's a lot.
And part of it is that I've also done a lot of theater scores, and I have some EPs and singles, and I did a covers EP, and I have another covers EP that's going to be coming out later this year. I have released a tremendous amount of music, and I'm really proud of, I'd say, 85% of it. I was listening to one of my theater scores the other day, and I was like, wow, this is really good. I forgot about this one. But my main music is generally dealing with issues of mental health and queerness and gender dysphoria. I'm a non-binary trans woman, and I've been out as some form of queer since I was 13 years old, so over 20 years at this point. And I've gone through my fair bit of shit in my life. I've dealt with a lot, and music is really my catharsis for that. it's so
Yeah.
healing, and it's so helpful for me to be able to channel all that negativity into something that in the end feels very positive and feels like I'm expressing myself in a way that I otherwise wouldn't be able to. And a lot of the time I will filter my experiences through pop culture influences. So I have an entire album which is instrumental, but still there's a lot of emotion in it. And I had a couple friends do some just vocalizations based on the Mapmakers trilogy of books by S.E. Grove, because those books had a profound effect on me. And that also marked a huge shift in my musical style. That was the first time I incorporated elements of funeral doom and black metal, and that was a very intentional choice. And that's still probably one of my favorite albums I've done. I wish I had mixed it a little bit differently, but I'm really proud of that. That one's called The Great Disruption. And since then, I've mostly been doing stuff in kind of a doom, sludge, black metal direction. I've been called death doom, which I don't really know what that means because I've never really listened to death metal. I think the closest band to death metal I like is Imperial Triumphant, and
I think well, that's a great
Awesome.
band.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that when you get paired up with that, it's usually due to the vocals, and then the music is more
okay,
doomy.
that makes sense.
You
I
know?
definitely
So, like,
do
like
those.
the
I
vocals
definitely
are.
do those super low, growly things. I was hugely inspired by Aaron Turner on that, which the Sleeping Shaman posted a review of Grief the other day, and someone finally picked up on that influence, and it made me really happy.
Nice.
But I've also released a lot of stuff that's not in that style, you know, besides my theater scores. The first album I put out last year, which was almost exactly a year ago at the end of March, was like a post-punk album. And one of the things I released last year was like over an hour of kind of ambient electronic stuff that was meant for just background. So Everson Poe is kind of a catch-all for most of the things I do that aren't specifically collaborative bands. And I'll still bring people in occasionally, like Abe from Revered and Reviled Above All Others. He did some vocals on the split that DB, also of the same band, and various other amazing projects. DB and I put out that split together, and Abe did some clean vocals for me that I absolutely love.
Sorry, which split was that one?
Ancestral Memory. So
Okay, of course.
the first four songs.
Yeah, that's actually the first album I listened to
cool.
of yours, and then I started working backwards, and I liked that a lot. I was like, "Wow, this is like real trippy," you know. It was definitely a journey, a really cool, awesome journey. I was like cooking dinner, and I was like, "Wow, this music is like." It's bringing me to places.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome.
One of my favorite things about that is that I actually recorded that after Grief, the 3 songs I did on there.
Huh.
And DB had sent me 1 or 2 of the songs that he was working on and asked if I wanted to do a split because he had already mixed Grief at that point. And I was like, yes, I want to do a split. And I was really heavily inspired by the songs that he sent me. So I kind of tried to take my usual style and infuse it with some of the influence I was getting from him. And I think it worked really well. And then once I started sending him stuff, it kind of, as he said, kicked his ass into gear to finish his songs because at that point he only had like 2.5, maybe 3 done. And so we kind of inspired each other back and forth. And I think that's why it works so well as a split album, is that the songs sound like they belong together, even though there is a clear delineation between who's making them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And thank you for letting us premiere that one. We actually really appreciated that opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I like I said, I've been releasing music for almost 12 years, and it's only been in the last year that more people than like my friends and family have actually started paying attention to it, which feels really great. You know, there are a few better feelings for me than people connecting with my music, because really I make it for myself. I make it for that catharsis that I get from it, but it also feels so good to know that like my music is touching people and they're getting something positive out of it.
Yeah.
And I might be grasping at straws here, but I definitely picked up a connection in theme and concept between ancestral memory and grief.
Oh, 100%. Like I said, I had finished grief before I did ancestral memory, and so I was kind of branching off of, part of grief is about this guy persecuting what he sees as evil. And some of that is like witchcraft and Satanism and stuff. That's why I have, an Aleister Crowley sample on there. And I was like, what if I explore the early parts of that? What if I go back in time and look at the things that led to the rise of Christianity and the reason that it persecutes those who are outside of it? And I just want to throw a disclaimer out there. I have no problem with people who practice Christianity in a responsible and healthy way. I have a huge problem with it when people use it to persecute other people, especially as a member of the queer community. That's an extremely important issue to me. And so if people are religious in a way that works for them and doesn't affect people around them negatively, more power to them. I think that's wonderful. These stories that I'm telling are about the people who don't do that, the people who use religion as a mask for hatred and use that hatred to lash out at people who aren't actually doing anything wrong or harmful.
Just being themselves.
Exactly.
Just different.
I fully share that sentiment as well. I've had a very unpleasant relationship with religion throughout my life, which I won't get into, but I'm an atheist myself, and I definitely agree that everyone has the right to believe whatever they want to believe. But again, that's your belief, and you can't force it onto somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I think that extends beyond religion to anything in life, really.
100%.
Politics, theology, all that stuff.
I think I was 10 when I declared myself an atheist. I stood up at recess one day in 5th grade and I went, God's not real. And I never went back from there. That said, I was raised casually Jewish, so it wasn't that big of a change for me, but.
Okay. I moved to the US last year, but I lived here once before that for about a year in the past. And I'm from New Zealand, which is a majority secular country, mostly more atheists than Christians. People still identify as Christian on the census because, their parents raised them Christian, they go to church once a year type thing. But most people aren't religious. So coming from New Zealand and Australia, those two countries, to the US was sort of a shock for me with how religious people actually are here.
I can't even
because I'd always heard about it, and I kind of had an idea of what it's going to be like, but I'd never in my entire life been asked by another stranger what religion I was in person until I got here, and then I met people on a regular basis oh, so are you Christian? I'm like, why would you ask me that? Having first met me, I've never asked a person that.
It's a little personal.
Exactly, it is. And then when I said I was an atheist, so you just believe in nothing? I'm like, well, I believe in stuff, just not from a religious context.
Yeah. I feel the same way, It's just I don't know. My wife is Jewish, so my kids are going to be, they're raised Jewish. We do the light holidays and stuff like that and the main stuff, but we don't really do much else. And I just always have been why are we all doing this? This looks this is so weird. You guys are all sheep. But when you do it, like you said, respectfully and for yourself and for family and tradition, that's all fine and you do you. But then once you're exactly using that mask for hate, it's all bullshit.
Absolutely agree.
So just so that this doesn't become a religious bashing episode of the show, I'm going to ask rituals again. That sort of is in the same theme of belief systems. Is that sort of is it sort of a concept stream that you're in at the moment, of those concepts you're focusing on?
Yeah, I would say so. It's really funny because I worked on rituals sort of at the same time as Monstrous Existence. I mean, there was definitely some overlap in time on that, to the point where sometimes I have to, like, I'm opening up my phone and looking at the track list to remind myself which songs are on which. So, yeah, I mean, I would say Rituals is less about religion and more about just kind of the various, whether secular or not, rituals that people go through for some kind of transformation. So the first song was based on the Shades of Magic book trilogy, and I actually wrote that when I had only finished the first book. I read the second book a couple months ago, and full disclosure, I was inpatient for a week and a half recently, and while I was in there, in 4 days, I read 3 books totaling 1,300 pages. I have never read that much that quickly in my life. And the third book in that series was one of the things I read. And it's really funny because there are a few things in the lyrics for Antari that I predicted would happen in the third book. And I literally had no idea. So that turned out kind of cool. And then, and then Ariadne is about the Netflix show Dark. There's a lot of references to the myth of Ariadne in that. At one point, they put on a play about it. Notre fin nous cane, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't speak French. I just really like putting titles in French sometimes. That, I think I've mentioned it at some point, that it was based on a dream I had where I literally lost one sense at a time until I knew I was alive, but I could not feel, see, hear, taste, touch, smell, anything. And it was absolutely terrifying. And it was just kind of the idea that, like, if you can't perceive anything, are you still alive? And then Fallow Hallowed is the one that's closest to talking about religion, and that was sort of about pagan rituals, which is why I set the music video that I edited together. Not great, but I still liked it, using pieces of Haxan, the sort of documentary from the 20s about witchcraft and all of that stuff. And I felt like all of the songs were about transformative rituals, and I kind of liked that idea. Most of my albums have been tied together by themes like that, and Grief is the only one I've done that's like a straight up narrative from beginning to end that runs through all the songs.
Right.
Nice.
And then I saw that the most recent thing. Oh, actually, it's showing up on registration on Bandcamp. It came out earlier. You did the single Lebens.
So that is I was looking up. You know how there are phrases or words in other languages that are technically untranslatable to English? I was looking up a list of those, and I had already been working on the lyrics for the song, and I found the word Lebensmüde, which in German is an expression that essentially means life tired. And a couple months ago, I was having a really rough time, thus me ending up in inpatient. I'm a chronic oversharer, in case you haven't noticed that. I've no problem talking about things like my own mental health, whether it's in my lyrics or not. I want to help normalize that so more people feel comfortable talking about it. Anyway, that title seemed very apt to me, both in terms of how I was feeling and how the lyrics came out of me. And most of the stuff for that song, actually all the stuff for that song, other than the lyrics, I did sitting at my dining room table one day with like a little Korg Nano key, which is basically like a normal computer keyboard, but laid out like some piano keys. So it has the same like feeling as just typing on a keyboard, which is very odd to use that, but I did it all on that, and then I came to my music room and I did the vocals for it, and it turned out great, But I didn't love my singing, and DB had already been planning on mixing and co-producing it with me. And I was like, do you want to replace my vocals in the verses? And I gave him like absolutely no direction. I was like, you don't have to follow the rhythm. You don't have to follow the melody, except in this one little spot. Do whatever you feel like doing with it. And he gave me back these vocals that to me sound like John Balance's vocal performance in Coil's song A Cold Cell. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I love collaborating with DB so much, whether he's just mixing and co-producing, or actually like contributing to my songs. It is one of the most magical musical partnerships I've ever had. And that came about just from like making friends with people on what I call lefty metal Twitter last year. And he reached out to me and was like, hey, I really like your music. Do you ever want me to mix anything for you? And that was a huge leap for me, because I've never let anyone touch Everson Poe stuff other than 2 albums that I let Wade Allen, formerly of Chicago industrial mainstays Christ Analog, he mastered them for me. But other than that, no one else has ever touched Everson Poe stuff. Not mixing, not producing, nothing. So it was very different for me, but I'm so glad I kind of let go and let him start working on stuff with me. Everything that he's done for me so far has been incredible, and he's taken it to places that I wouldn't have expected, but I love.
That's fantastic.
There you go. That's awesome.
It's crazy how you make those partnerships just through the internet. Like, you might not know what our story is, but I actually only met Brendan last year through the internet. My friend Matt and I, who've been friends for a decade or so, started this site last year, and we just met Brendan through a group, some music group, and he started posting in our group. Like, man, this guy has great taste in music, and then he came on as an
That's
admin.
awesome.
So, and he's been running the site since, and we've been best buds since then too. So it was a great coincidence.
I mean, I think as much as all of the isolation from COVID has really, really sucked. I mean, I'm super touch starved. I'm someone who like really likes having physical contact with people, or even just being in the same room as them. It's been really hard for me, but I think that has pushed me into reaching out more to people on the internet and having more than just like really casual acquaintances. Like DB and I talk every day. I have a few other friends who have never met in real life, who I talk to literally every day. We check in on each other. We make sure the other person's doing okay. We talk about involved stuff, because like those are the people that you can forge that connection with right now. So I'm kind of trying to like do my best to look on the bright side of COVID, and that's one of the only things I've found about it.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, it makes like all of like, maybe not have like maybe necessarily more friendships, but the quality friendships that you have definitely gotten better.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
at least for me. You know.
I'm like you. I've never really made friends on the internet before, because I'm very much like an in-person person. And I've made a lot of really close friends through the internet in the past 12 months. That is something very new for me, but they're very genuine friendships. So we, like you said, we talk every day as well. So it's really great that, I mean, if this has happened at any other time in history when you didn't have that method of connection, it would have been a really different experience of being locked in your house for this long.
Kind of weird. Like, why does this dude on the internet keep talking to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're very lucky that this coincided with an era where we have limitless online connection and streaming services, because filling the time of being at home for that long would have been quite quite a struggle, I guess.
If it wasn't for streaming services, I probably would have watched every single physical home video thing that I have twice over.
Yeah, I think it's definitely kept a lot of people sane over the last 12 months or so.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, if Blockbuster was still around, there would have been
Oh,
doing
yeah, there's
making
a
a
line
making a
like,
killing.
Blockbuster so much. There used to be one right near my parents' house, and there was a Boston Market next to it, which at the time was just called Boston Chicken. So I would always go into Blockbuster while we were waiting for our food, and I would start when you walked into the store. For some reason, you started at the end of the new release wall. So I would look through the entire new release wall from Z to A, and then I would usually just end up
Yep.
renting the 2 VHS special edition of Terminator 2, which I think I rented a total of 30 times over the course of a couple years because I fucking love that movie. It's absolutely perfect. And that extended version is amazing.
I haven't watched that in a long time. I have to revisit that actually now that you
I
mentioned.
just watched the newest
Was it
Terminator movie not too long ago.
Yeah, me too.
Staying up late, and I liked it.
It
I
was
thought good.
I was not expecting much from it, just because it's one of those things where Hollywood just churns out a remake of something that's already been done.
Yeah,
But I genuinely thought it was decent. It's not as
Yeah.
good as like the original couple of them, but I definitely think it's probably worth a watch if you like the originals.
I mean, I haven't seen any of them except the first two, which is kind of funny.
Okay.
I know.
Oh, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. I think
will
you'd enjoy
say-
it.
What
You'd
was-
enjoy it.
Oh, no.
What was the one where it was set? Oh, sorry. I was just asking, Brendan, you've seen them. What was the one that was set before the first couple of movies? The one that was like in the actual
wasn't
future
that
explaining the whole
Salvation?
backstory?
Yeah, I never
Yeah, it
saw
was
that
Salvation.
either.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
I
they
think so.
used a version of The Day the World Went Away by Nine Inch Nails in the trailer, but they added percussion to it, and it was so bizarre to me because to me one of the most amazing things about that song is that there's no percussion whatsoever. It's just that wall of guitars and Trent's vocals, and I always felt like that was really powerful in itself. So the first time I saw that trailer and there were drums, I remember just like, raising one eyebrow and going, what the fuck? I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan. I have a Nine Inch Nails tattoo, not of the logo or anything. It's a lyric and some imagery to go with it. But yeah, I'm very precious about
awesome.
things like that.
We had Raymond Watts
that's
from Pig
amazing. I gotta
on a
listen
few
to
weeks
that.
ago, and yeah, he's one of the most down to earth, like chill dudes I've ever spoken to. But yeah, he sounds a bit about his time touring with Trent Reznor with Nine Inch Nails, and he was on his label and stuff. So
Nice.
yeah, according to him, he's a great dude as well. So okay, this is a question I've been meaning to ask you for a little while now. The name Everson Poe, is that a reference to? Okay, I guess what the reference was to. Was it to a combination of poets as in William Everson and Edgar Allan Poe, or am I completely off the mark?
Completely off the mark, actually. So,
Okay, I thought I might be.
A book series that I love is the Phineas Poe trilogy by Will Christopher Bear. I discovered the first book, I think it was my sophomore year in high school. I used to go to Barnes and Noble a lot. There's one in the mall that's right by my parents' house. I actually ended up working there in high school. And I worked in the music department, of course. But I would go in there all the time and just look for books with intriguing covers. And the cover of the first book, Kiss Me Judas, was a picture of one of the hotel rooms at the Standard Hotel, which there used to be one in West Hollywood, and I think that closed. I think there's still one in downtown LA, but it's, kind of like a swanky hotel at the time. It was sort of like futuristic, and I had stayed there for spring break my freshman year of high school with my parents. I don't even remember why we decided to go to LA, but we went. It was great. And I saw the cover of the book, and I'm like, wait, that looks like a room at the Standard. And I picked it up, and I read the back of it, and I was like, wow, I want to read this. And then all three books in the trilogy are really amazing to me, and I think I've read all of them at least 5 times, which is, I don't often reread books because I tend to remember things very well, but I loved the experience of reading them so much. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling a bit. I tend to do that in case you haven't noticed.
Good.
But So the main character's name is Phineas Poe, and at one point he mentions a sibling named Everson, and the name comes up again at like the very end of the third book, and I loved that name. I loved that it kind of seemed gender neutral, and I was like, no one else is ever going to try to use this. And before I switched to Everson Poe, I had been using the name Ember for my music, and I looked it up online one time and I saw like, oh, there's like so many different people and bands named Ember. And then I looked up Everson Poe, and it was like I found one article that was a review of one of the Phineas Poe books, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to use that. So I think it was in 2006 that I actually started using that name and just, labeling my stuff in my iTunes library. And then once I put out my first album, I stuck with it. And I'm really glad that I did, because there is still, if you search Everson Poe on Google, you only find me and stuff about me, my music, the numerous posts that I've made on Echoing the Sound, the Nine Inch Nails message board I spend way too much time on. But yeah, so that's where the name came from. And I still love those books. It's been a while since I've read them, but I think I'm due for a reread.
So I was semi-close with the poetry thing, but it was literature, not poetry, the direction. That split that you did for Plague Upon Four Houses, I was a huge fan of that. And you actually introduced me through that to Karnstein, Rage of Devils, and Wyeth, so thank you for that. How did that come about? How did you meet those artists?
I think the first person that I friended on Twitter who was part of the lefty metal Twitter scene was Tommy, Order of the Wolf. And he was so sweet. And that was kind of the beginning of my music getting noticed, because I ended up on the Hope versus Hate compilation. And that was huge for me. And through Tommy, I started making friends with various people on Twitter, Sarah Allen Reed, Rhea from Karnstein, and Aaron from Rage of Devils, among various other people. And I think at one point, Rhea sent me a message and was like, hey, we have a few songs that we want to put on a split. Do you want to do a split with us? And I was like, yes, I do. Because I loved their demo, and I love Rhea. She's amazing. And she was like, I might ask a couple other people. So she also asked Aaron and Sarah Allen Reed. And we determined that I was going to mix everything, and then Sarah was going to master it. And it was really fun putting that together. I didn't end up mixing the Wyeth stuff because Sarah was kind of like down to the wire on it, and she just did it herself. But I got to mix the Rage of Devils and Karnstein stuff, and that was awesome for me because it had been a long time since I'd really worked on someone else's music, and it was fun to just kind of like sit in the producer's chair and shape the songs that already existed. And and then we decided on the order of the album, and I think it turned out really great. The two songs that I did on there, my lyrics for one of them, for Machot Misraim, which is the 10 plagues of Egypt, I feel like at the time I was really, really proud of them, and I still think they're good lyrics, but they're kind of split. Like, I start out talking about modern racism and like make a lot of references to the structure of the KKK and just how evil that shit is. But before that, I'm talking about gender dysphoria, and then I talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt. And so it's like there's three lyrical themes going on in there, and they sort of work together, they sort of don't. But the music for that song's great. And then the other song is just straight up based on the video game Hollow Knight, and I even used some dialogue from the game as lyrics. And for that one, Aaron and Rhea actually did some screaming with me at the end of the song, so it turned into like gang vocals, which I'm a huge fan of. and Sarah did like 2 lines of clean vocals on the other song. So it was fun. And then like all of us did some vocals on a Karnstein song and I think 2 Rage of Devil songs on it. So it was a very collaborative process, and for the most part I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that got out there and that we used the money for charity.
What was the charity it gave to again? I remember that actually, that it was for charity.
Because Sarah set it up with the Forest at Night Bandcamp, which was the launch of the label associated with the radio show. I want to say it was to a bail fund. I cannot remember, just because I donated a bunch of money to various charities last year through several of my releases, and like I donated a little bit this year already, and my brain is just kind of swimming with stuff because there's been so much of it. And it's funny, I haven't had a job for like a year, and I was still like, I'm going to donate money to charity. People still need this more than me. And I'm glad I've been able to do that.
I've actually been in the same boat as you, not working for a year. Because I immigrated in April, and with COVID, which was the worst time, I chose during an international pandemic to immigrate, which was a bad choice. So I got my work visa last week after a year of waiting. So it was a big thank you, big celebration.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go through the process of work now, but I fully understand what you mean. It's one of those things where it's a blessing and a curse, because like you, I've stepped up my creative side of things because I have had time to do so, and I never had in the past, and that's how the site was born. But again, you made those connections with people you wouldn't normally have met, so you can't write off the whole year, even though it's been a very weird time. It's been productive in different ways, I guess. I just thought of something that I was going to bring up earlier when you were talking about Doom Death. You said that you're not really too familiar with the subgenre.
I don't remember the first time I heard it. I want to say it was in. I want to say it was in one of the reviews I got for something last year. Someone described my music as death doom, and I was like, I don't know what that means. And so that was interesting to me, because until you explained it earlier, Brendan, I assumed it was like just a hybrid of doom metal and death metal. And I was like, I don't really know what death metal sounds like, because it's just not a subgenre of metal that I ever really got into. But my friend Alex, when I had shown him Imperial Triumphant the first time, he was like, I didn't know you listened to death metal. I'm like, this is death metal? And he's like, partially. I was like, oh, cool.
So Doom Death is kind of like that, it's a partial fusion. For me, your latest few albums have really reminded me of like 90s era Doom Death, which was kind of the golden age of the genre. It's a portion of music that I really love myself. So that's what drew me to your music so much, is that you reminded me of those classic bands that put out these legendary albums in the early 90s that very few people have come close to producing the same sort of quality of that sound. Oh, definitely. Seriously, that Rituals, the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God, this sounds like Dance of December Souls, which is, in my opinion, one of the best metal albums ever created. And very few people have embraced that sound in recent years, which is a massive shame. So, I mean, if you're ever looking to check out some of the stuff that people are talking about when they use that reference, definitely listen to like the first Catatonia album, Dance of December Souls. There's an album called Kiddush from an Israeli doom death band called Salem from like 94. There's Anathema's first 2 albums, which are definitely doom death, and there's stuff like My Dying Bride, their early stuff, Turn Loose the Swans. All of those are perfect in my opinion.
I remember that I checked out Dance of December Souls because I feel like one of the reviews that you wrote for me, you compared some of my stuff to that, and I was like, oh, I should check that out. And Abe and DB are also big fans of Catatonia, so I checked it out and I was like, oh, I like this. I can see where the comparison is coming from.
Yeah, it's the level of emotion in the instrumentals and in the vocals, and then just the rawness of the vocals as well. That there's sort of like pained sound to
Yeah,
them,
for sure.
as
I
opposed
mean,
to just trying to be
my
brutal.
screaming has always come from, to me, it feels like a place of desperation. And my scream has definitely changed a bit over the years, and part of that is a conscious effort. It wasn't until a few years ago that I started being able to do my Aaron Turner-esque scream, and I'm really, really proud of that fact because he's one of my favorite musicians and vocalists. And I was like, I don't want to copy him, but I want to emulate him in a way where I am presenting the same kind of emotional intensity that he is able to do with his voice. And I think that turned out really well. That said, doing those lower screams is a lot harder for me. It's a lot harder on my vocal cords than doing higher screams. So the spoiler alert, I'm already working on another new album, and I've been doing some more like higher pitched shrieking style vocals. Not quite the same as the Chip King from the Body-esque stuff that I've done occasionally, but I guess more of like a black metal screech. And I found that really doesn't hurt my voice very much. And I'm like, oh, cool, I can do this, and I can do it sustainably. That's great.
That's awesome. I'm a huge fan of black metal as well. Do you listen at all to like music that's classified as depressive, suicidal black metal? Have you heard that
I've
term?
gotten filed under in reviews, and I'm like, oh wow, sorry. Like I always feel like, oh, I don't want to make people feel more depressed when they listen to my music. But I guess I can see why I would get filed under that. I feel like the first couple bands that I ever heard that had elements of that, I mean, like, The Great Disruption, which again is like my first album that I did in this sort of realm, that was really heavily inspired by bands like Lycus. And I don't even remember how I found Lycus. It was like, I think I bought something on Amazon and it was like, you may also like, and I saw the album cover for Chasms. I was like, oh, that looks beautiful. And I checked it out and I listened to that album obsessively for a few months, just like every time I was in the car. And that had a huge influence on The Great Disruption. And then I sort of started branching out from there. A lot of the like post-metal influence in my music comes from ISIS and especially Rosetta. I have a Rosetta tattoo. That's how much I love that band. If you haven't heard them, I would highly recommend you check them out.
All right. I actually haven't. Yes, I've checked out. I'm a huge ISIS fan, but I haven't heard
The album I
Rosetta.
would start with is probably their second album, Wake Lift. It is just, it's a masterpiece from start to finish. I love it so much. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much DSBM I've listened to. I tend to like a lot of black metal bands that kind of break the rules. So one of my favorite bands that are considered black metal is Wolves in the Throne Room. I mean they're fantastic, and they definitely do a lot of things that break the mold of that genre. My favorite album by them is actually Celestine, which is an ambient keyboard album, which is kind of funny. But I really like some of Alcest's stuff, and I'm trying to think of what other like straight up black metal I actually listen to. I personally am not a fan of raw black metal unless it's being made by someone I know. So like I love Rage of Devils because I think what Erin is doing is amazing, and also she's only been writing and recording music for a little over a year. That is nuts to me that she has reached that level of musicianship. But for the most part, if I'm going to listen to music, I want it to sound good. You know, I'm an audiophile. I'm someone who's been writing, recording, and mixing my own stuff for over 20 years. I can't stand listening to stuff that is like so high pitched and screechy that it hurts. You know, that what is it? Ulver's second or third album. I tried to listen to that once and I was like, I literally can't do this. It was causing me physical pain, which is too bad because the songs are good and their first album is great. But I need some kind of production value. So there's definitely a lot of black metal that I've just kind of pushed to the side and been like, it's not for me.
And then you get those people that are the exact opposite.
Right.
You're like, this thing's
and then you have
overproduced. It
people
sounds
who are
too
like,
clean.
metal should be dangerous. And basically what they mean is metal should be racist and exclusive to, white people who hate everyone. And,
you see those guys on
one
the
of my
internet
favorite
a lot.
things about being part of that lefty metal Twitter is that we call that shit out. All of us work to I feel like I talked about this in my Growls and Shrieks interview with Weirding, and to me, we're trying to make metal dangerous for those people. We're trying to say you are not welcome here because we are not going to tolerate your intolerance. I don't remember who it is, but someone coined the term the paradox of intolerance, or maybe it's the paradox of tolerance, that the only thing that should be not tolerated is intolerance itself, because otherwise you're just allowing hate to fester. And like I said, for me, music should be transformative, it should be cathartic, and it should be healing for people. Even if there's hate involved in it, it should be hate for things that need to change for everyone to live better. It shouldn't be like, you're gay, so I hate you. That's I don't understand people who think like that in the first place, but I definitely don't understand people who dedicate their music to just hating people.
Yeah. It's like, do you really is your life that sad that you have nothing better to do with your time, or no other passions that you can dedicate your energy to, apart
I
from
always say it
hating
takes
people?
more energy to be an asshole than it does to
it's
be a nice person.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. It's like
nothing to be nice.
It's the same thing with if you're watching something on TV that you don't like, getting upset about it and ranting at the TV takes a lot more energy than I'm just going to watch something else. If you don't like it, that's not, that's fine. You're allowed to not like stuff. That's fine. But that everyone else is entitled to like that thing, and if you don't like it, and that's in relation to taste. That's not in relation to people being themselves. You don't get to have an opinion
as long as
on other people and who they choose to be.
Kind of like what we talked about earlier in our discussion. As long as what someone is doing is not actually harming anyone else, then who gives a shit?
Yes.
Just let people be themselves, and
it
doesn't affect you.
And the thing is with that whole freedom of expression, freedom of speech thing, they're right. They have the freedom to make this music that is full of hate. But then platforms, social media platforms, streaming platforms also have the right to say, we don't like this, we're not going to promote it. We're not going to put it on our platform.
Yeah.
And other people have the right to disagree with them and call them out as well. So it works both ways.
Adopted a zero Nazis policy. I know some bands put out an album not that long ago, and I know one of the guys in the band is a convicted pedophile or something. And I mean, first of all, that
you're talking about Inquisition, right?
Gross. And I know there's a lot of horrifying album covers in the world of metal, but that was just that made me feel ill looking at it. It was something like a cosmic Grim Reaper taking a shit or something. Why would you want that to be your album cover? But then, you factor in the person who's in that band, and it's just no, fuck no, get that out of here. And I love that Bandcamp was yeah, we're not having that. Get the fuck out of here.
That was the one, I think it was called Black Mask or a mass grave, and it's the Grim Reaper. Yeah, the Grim Reaper shitting in a grave.
I can't even talk about it without laughing because it's so stupid.
It is pretty dumb. And then I saw a whole thing on their label is, I don't want to get it wrong because I don't want to accuse the wrong label. I believe it's Argonia or something along those lines. But I think whichever label it is, I saw a massive argument on their Facebook page with people dude, why are you still putting out their albums after the guy was convicted of pedophilia? And they're well, I mean, he was convicted of it. It doesn't mean he did it. What I mean?
Willful ignorance and cognitive dissonance are really incredible.
Yeah, I was like, well, even if he's like, falsely convicted of it, do you still really want to associate your brand with that person? Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot of people out there who aren't really, I guess, politically and socially consciously minded in relation to music. They just think of music as, oh, I'm just going to put out music. And they don't really think about that overarching
there was
context
a thing
of the bigger
last year
picture.
that happened, I think it was last year, like late last year, on the Nine Inch Nails Facebook page. And I deleted Facebook 3 years ago, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. But because I'm on Echoing the Sound so much, I know about everything that goes on the, as we called it back in the 90s, the Ninternet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stay appraised of these situations. And, Trent had posted something that was very left-wing, because Trent has always kind of been an outspoken left-wing person, and all of these conservative Nine Inch Nails fans, maybe it was on Instagram, and people were just like flipping out and being like, I can't believe one of my favorite bands is getting political, and I'm a conservative fan, and now I feel like I can't listen to them. And it's like, have you listened to Year Zero? I mean, have you listened to any of the lyrics in these songs? It's not like Trent's been hiding his political viewpoint all these years. He's been pretty upfront about it. And in interviews, he's talked about things. And it's just like, if you didn't know that, you were either, again, being willfully ignorant, or you just weren't paying attention. And and it's like, everyone should be able to like the music they want to like, as long as it's not harmful to people. But like, getting all pissed off because a musician that you like has an opinion, and that opinion is that everybody deserves rights and should be treated right, and your opinion is not that, like, maybe just find something else to listen to.
I don't know if you saw this earlier this year, but there's the guy went viral because Tom Morello called him out when someone posted like, since when is like Rage Against the Machine political?
And then like someone criticized Tom Morello for like doing something white guys do, and Tom Morello was just like, I'm not white. And it's, oh my god, it was like,
I'm not white.
I love when people get owned on the internet for things like that, where it's just like, they are just so eager to get pissed off at someone. And like, I get it, I get easily riled up about things, but like, if you're going to attack someone for something, do your research.
His dad's from, was it Kenya? I think it was Kenya. He's half black. And the funniest thing is, once that person called him out and he responded with that, they didn't back down either. They carried on.
Yeah. And he also has like a political science major, like went to school for it.
Yeah.
And he's an activist. He's always been a political activist.
Right.
It'd be like someone saying that...
Well, people said the same thing about System of a Down as well. Like, since we're no System of a Down, a bunch of lefties. I'm like, have you ever listened to one of their songs? Like,
which is why it's
really all a social commentary. Like their entire discography.
Anti-vax Trump supporter, and I
know.
I started reading that stuff, and I was like, I don't understand how they can be in this band with this guy, and how he can play these songs that are very clearly like diametrically opposed to his political viewpoints.
Yeah, for me, I thought that was weirder for him than them. Like, I mean, they can tolerate him because his beliefs don't come through in the music at all. But it's very weird for him to play that music if he feels so strongly about those.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I've steered us
those
off
topics. Yeah, it made no sense to me
direction now.
Good.
It's completely fine. I have to head off in about 25 minutes for another meeting I have for some of my other commitments. But Brendan always has some pretty fun questions to wrap up the last part of the interview, so I'll let him take over with those, if that's cool.
Well, you've done a lot of collaborating. Who is somebody that you would love to collaborate with that you haven't?
From Kaina and I are potentially collaborating on a project. Jacob from Shrieking and I are potentially collaborating on a project. I'm supposed to record drums for one of Audrey Hornet's songs for her project Miri. I'm trying to think of people who I'm like not friends with on Twitter, who I'm not in pretty regular contact with. You know, like, do you mean like a dream collaboration with anybody?
Yeah. Like, what would be like? You're like, you're gonna be able to finally get like certain sounds
100% Josh
and like even a
Eustace from
concept. Like,
Telephone
it
to
doesn't
Leave.
matter.
I absolutely adore him. He's such a sweet human being, and he's not just an incredible musician, but like the way that he uses sound is unlike anyone I've ever heard. And I feel like working with him would be a dream come true. Even if it wasn't on some of the more electronic leaning stuff that I do, because he's well versed in other stuff. He toured with Nine Inch Nails for a while. It's not like he only does electronic stuff. I think he would bring a lot into the world of my music that would be very interesting. And then I'd also love to have someone like
Oh god.
Oh yeah, no problem.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have to hang on 1 second. Sorry. What?
I have something to tell you, but there's a second movie Octonauts about volcanoes. Even New Gus is tree filled and has some big buttons. And he has one big button. I told Bruce, I tweaked the tone, and then he turned the one button in the New Gus, and then it transformed in like a sea crystal.
Really? That's amazing.
And pressed again, and turned into a robot gun.
Wow.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So it turns into a...
And then all the sea creatures were sitting there, and the Octonauts needed to stop the volcanoes. To stop all the volcanoes, I stopped all the volcanoes, released one more, and one shot that it.
Oh, really?
And so we needed to stop that one. And then...
Very passionate.
We turned the big button into robot mode.
Really? That's so cool. Well, I'll watch it with you in a little bit. That's a new one?
I wanted to watch that one, so I pressed it and watched it. And what's medium one?
Cool. All right. Well, I'm almost done with this, and I'll be in.
Our whole family can watch the new movie one.
All right. We get it figured out.
That was so cute.
I love you, dude.
Is watching Octonauts?
Yeah. He loves Octonauts. Like, it's.
All right,
he's
so
always
the other
watching
person
that
I
show,
would love
like,
to collaborate with, who has actually
that's
worked with
funny.
Josh Eustace, is Kennedy Ashland of Them Are Us Too, and her solo project is Searskew. I saw her open for the Black Queen one of the times I saw them, and she just has one of the most incredible voices in the world, and she's super nice, and I just feel like working with her would be amazing.
Nice. So I know, like, if you could do a live show.
Oh, Jesus. Well, in order
like,
to do a live show,
who would
I
you
have
want
to
to open
clone
for?
myself 5 times, and one of me is more than enough. So I've thought about playing live before, and I don't know enough musicians who live in Chicago who I would be able to teach all my songs, arrange them in a way that they would be able to play live. It would just, I mean, it would be a really complicated thing. I have some songs where there's 6 guitars, 2 basses, drums, 3 vocals, and, you know, like other stuff going on all at the same time. I think Fallow Hallowed off of Rituals in total throughout the 12-minute runtime of the song, there are 42 guitar tracks. And that's ridiculous. I mean, like, when I was mixing that, I was just like, wow, I'm really glad these aren't all happening at the same time. But so if I could find a way to play live, I think I would really love to play. I would love to play with Emiru Thrundle, Thou, and The Body. I think, yeah, I think that would be an amazing lineup. And
yeah, that would be a good time.
You know, you could also throw J Jail and or Young Widows in there.
The Thou just blows. Thou and The Body just blow my mind. The amount of music they put out, the sheer output that they have.
Yeah, those 2 bands are 2 of my favorite bands in existence. I have,
and it's always quality.
Every single thing of both of theirs on vinyl that I've been able to get my hands on, because I love them so much.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know, like, you know how there's a lot of projects that put stuff out, but there's no one else I can think of that puts out that much music but none of it's bad. Like, I haven't heard like a single song from other than the recent memory that I'd be like, well, that sucks.
Sure. Well, and like,
right.
They
do charitable work too.
I've interacted with Brian, Chip, and Lee various times on various social media platforms, and they're just like, they're super sweet. You know, you wouldn't think that the 2 guys in The Body would be like the nicest people ever, given the kind of music they make. And then you interact with them, and you're just like, oh, I want to give you a hug.
It's like George Fisher, Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse, is like this goofy dad who plays like with his kids and stuff, and is on World of Warcraft every weekend, and he's like just the goofiest, like chillest dude, and he's releasing of Cannibal Corpse, which is hilarious. Yeah, exactly. It's like music does not represent the person necessarily. It's art. It's the same as like, I'm sure you meet a lot of horror movie directors who aren't psychopaths.
He's a very chill dude, and then why can't I remember his name? The guy who did Phantasm. Don Coscarelli. Yeah. Another like super nice.
Like 6 of those movies.
I saw a double feature one time of John Dies at the End and Bubba Hotep, and he did like a Q&A between, and he was just like fun and goofy.
That's awesome. I love that. Sorry, Brendan. Back to you.
No, you're good. What is your favorite instrument to play?
Most of the time when I'm writing songs, I start with guitar, and I have guitars in various tunings. I have a Fender Jaguar that's like a baritone custom, but when I bought it, it was set up as a bass 6, which is really weird. And at this point, I don't remember which album, other than The Great Disruption, that is the only guitar on that album. I have my old Fender Strat, which is the first electric guitar I got, and that has 4 strings on it tuned to CG, and I used to play it with a cello bow because I was obsessed with Sigur Rós in high school. And then I've got a couple guitars that I keep in standard tuning, and I have a couple basses. But honestly, I think the most fun... Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I think the most fun that I have is when I'm playing drums. And especially since I started doing blast beat stuff. And, you know, you've heard it. I do black metal blast beats. I cannot do the blast beats where you're like doing the double kick at the same time, or like, you know, constantly using both your hands at the same time. I just like, I feel like my limbs are going to fall off if I do that. But the kind of blast beats that I do, I love kind of pushing myself. I've been able to get up to 280 BPM with those, and DB might have me play some drums on upcoming The Sun Came Up Upon the Left material, and I was like, if you want to try to push me past that point, I will work on it for you. The fastest I've ever gone, I think, is 280. But I love I love pushing myself with that, and it feels the most what's the word I'm looking for? Kinetic. I love that kinetic movement in music. In any of the bands that I've been in, it's always been the most fun for me to be on drums. The band I was in for the longest time, the Elizabeth Dane, which was with a few guys who I knew from doing storefront theater with them, I played drums in the band. And I also recorded, mixed, produced our stuff. But it was just so fun to just focus on playing drums.
Nice. Who inspired you to get into music, like besides yourself? Like, because you say you write a lot of music, mostly geared for yourself.
My dad is a huge audiophile, and
into it?
he occasionally has questionable taste in music, but he also likes a lot of really good music. And I think I was 7 when he pulled out In the Court of the Crimson King on vinyl. And at the time, I was absolutely terrified of the album cover. But he put that on. He actually put the record on. And my mind was just fucking blown. And King Crimson is still one of my favorite bands. I've seen them live like 6 times. The most recent time being in the fall of 2019.
Wow.
And I don't really play music like that, but if you listen back through some of my stuff, you can hear little bits of influence in the song Always Drowning on my album Becoming. There's a guitar riff in there that is very similar to Frame by Frame from Discipline, which is one of my favorite King Crimson songs. So I really owe it to my dad for like really getting me into music. And it's funny because when I was a really little kid, I either listened to what my parents did, which was unfortunately mostly Bob Marley, or fortunately Joni Mitchell. And, occasionally my dad would show me some really cool stuff. And then when I would hang out with my friend Jeremy, we would listen to almost nothing but They Might Be Giants. And then I got my first boombox when I was 9, I think. And my parents gave it to me with Flood by They Might Be Giants and Pisces' Carriot by the Smashing Pumpkins, because I had heard their cover of Landslide on the radio and I loved it. And I think some of my other first few CDs were like the Blue Album by Weezer, Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt, and 16 Stone by Bush. So, I had some of my own moments of questionable taste, although I would say most of those albums are still pretty great. But yeah, I mean, it's also funny because before I moved out to the suburbs as a kid, when I lived in the city, the kids that I hung out with listened to B96, which I think still exists here as a radio station. But at the time, they played stuff that was like, kind of club music. So like Be My Lover by LaBouche and Another Night, Another Dream by The Real McCoy. Stuff like that, where it was usually like a woman singing the choruses and a guy really horribly rapping during the verses, set to like a nice beat and some good synths. And honestly, I still love listening to that kind of music, especially like Saturday night. I look up music videos on YouTube,
My experience of getting into music was very similar to yours as well,
nice.
with my dad. It was also prog rock as well, which was Pink Floyd. When I was a kid, I still have like some of my best memories from our childhood is still him putting on which album was it? It was The Wall.
I was gonna say my dad got me into,
I totally understand what you
and
mean
bands
about
like
that
Steely
influence.
Dan and stuff, and then I was just like, oh wow, these guys.
Yeah, we saw Steely Dan as a family when I was like, I don't know, I want to say 12 or something, and it was such a fun show.
When I turned 18, my dad brought me to see Jethro Tull. That was pretty fun.
Solid band.
My mom lived in San Francisco for a while in the 70s,
nice.
And she dated one of their bass players for a while. One of the ones that died. Yeah, I used to make a joke that she was a witch and she
Oh,
killed him,
wow.
which is not true. I promise my mom did not kill the bass player.
Oh, that's funny. Well, what's your guilty pleasure?
Brendan, do you have
band?
any more? Or was that your last one there?
Ooh, it's interesting because I understand what the term guilty pleasure means, but for me, I don't really get embarrassed
Right.
about stuff unless it's my dad making the same stupid joke over and over. Like every time you ask him to light the grill, he goes, "Grill of my dreams," because my dad is a fucking dork. But I love him. So for me, I would say I don't really have a guilty pleasure band, but I am such a sucker for like a good pop hook. So, I mean, Carly Rae Jepsen is incredible. I cannot listen to her album Emotion without crying repeatedly throughout its runtime. Something about it just like hits me really hard, and it's weird to want to dance and be bawling your eyes out at the same time. But that's what her music does to me. And I've also heard other great pop songs recently. Dua Lipa is fantastic. I finally heard WAP the other day for the first time, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually really fun." So there's a lot of great pop music on there, and I feel like if you can just kind of let go and enjoy the music and not have to be like, "Oh, this is the deepest song in existence," it's really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually got really into
Nice.
Megan Thee Stallion, which I think she's fantastic. I love a lot of her music. She's from WAP, which is
I
the
guess
reference why
I
I
would
brought it up.
say I actually really like Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. I think it's a good song. I mean, like, it's catchy as hell, it's fun, and it makes you want to dance.
Great song.
Very easily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually
And it gets stuck in your head too, like
posted a video of it on
so
Twitter,
long
but,
after you
like,
hear it.
last night I was just like, I was in a really good mood. I threw on a cute dress. I put on the Black Queen's second album, and I had a dance party by myself. And I just like, it felt amazing. And I love that music allows us to express ourselves in so many different ways, whether I'm making it or I'm listening to it or I'm interacting with it like that. And I cannot wait until hopefully everyone is vaccinated, and I don't want things to get back to normal, but I want things to be better so that we can go back out in the world. And I just want to like go to a bar and dance. I don't care about drinking. I just want to go dance with some friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I miss there's the little things you took for granted. Like you go to a bar and there's a live band playing, you have music while you're hanging out type thing. Like I miss that so
or like,
much. And there's something
you're
you
out at
didn't
a
even think
restaurant
about
and they have a patio
that it was a
open and they
great
just
thing
have
and you had
someone
it. You know what I mean?
playing,
You can't just take it for
they're
granted.
like a violin even, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Like it's just something.
Yeah.
Like it's nice. Like, music it's important.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, the
know,
last
me too.
Oh yeah, the
the
last
last
show I
live music
saw
I
was
saw was
February
February
29th
last year, which
I
is like
saw
that's
Telefon Tel
so long
Aviv
ago.
at Lincoln Hall here in Chicago, which is probably my favorite venue here. And I mean, I'm really glad that A, two of my friends were there, so I got to be with them,
Mm-hmm.
and B, I cried through half that show because it was just so incredible. And the newest Telefon Tel Aviv album, if you haven't heard it, it is such a beautiful cinematic journey. It's based on a recurring dream that Josh has had since he was a kid, and oh god, he played all the songs from it live, not in order, but he played them all, and it was just phenomenal. So I'm at least glad the last concert I saw was really good.
I got to see Ohm. That was cool.
Nice.
Yeah, end of March. I still got my ticket stub.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Ooh, nice.
I saw Obituary play Cause of Death in full, which was it
Oh,
was
we
great.
didn't know. We didn't fucking know.
No one at the time, I'm sure, when we saw our last
Yeah.
concerts, knew that it was going to be the last gig they would see for a year, though. No. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to have to head off soon. So I just wanted to ask you, did you have anything you wanted to touch on before you left, or anything you wanted to announce coming up, or just tell people where to find your music type
I've
thing?
put out a bunch of stuff on Trepanation in the last year. I also have some stuff that hasn't come out on Trepanation. You can also find me on streaming services. I'm pretty sure Dan has put up everything we've released together on YouTube, and everything else I've done, I've put out through DistroKid, so I think it automatically goes to YouTube. If you want some fun podcasts to listen to, there's The Losers Club, which is a Stephen King podcast, which I occasionally edit. I'm the main editor of the Halloweenies podcast, which is a bunch of the same people who are people I know in real life. And then I'm just going to give a shout out to Horror Queers, which is my favorite podcast. Joe and Trace do amazing work. I absolutely love them. I love that they look at horror movies, which are one of my favorite things, through the lens of queerness. And they're so inclusive, and they're so responsible about the way they talk about and handle things, and that makes me feel wonderful. Like I said, Grief comes out April 2nd, which by the time this comes out will have already passed, but please check it out. I'm really, really proud of it. I made some t-shirts that were designed by Unknown Relic and logo by Sledgework, and we did those as like a limited edition thing along with the album and on cassette. Unfortunately, those are all sold out, but if there's enough interest, we might do a reprint of the shirts in the future. Check out all the bands that I've mentioned, because there's some really great people making really great music, and a lot of them are queer and or trans, and I love supporting my people. I think it's amazing that there's so many of us, especially in the metal world, who are just like giving a giant middle finger to the people who hate us and saying like, we belong in this space, you don't.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else other than just to say thank you to y'all for, you know, featuring my stuff and reviewing it and asking me on here. It's really amazing to, like I said, know people like my music and want to support it and believe in it. It's really incredible.
That's good. It's, you know, I love music with emotion and stuff that's like real, you know, and
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
about as real as you can get right there.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have a number of releases over the next 12 months, so we'll probably have to have you back on again to discuss some more music in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, and thank you to everyone who's been listening. We appreciate your time. We'll have someone on taking a little bit of a break because I'm out of the state, but we'll have some new guests coming towards the end of the month, so keep your ears open. Thanks, everyone.
Sure.
Lord visible and sensible, of whom this earth is the present, oft turning about thee with annual and diurnal motion. Source of light, let thy perpetual radiance partner to continual labor and enjoyment. So that we are constant partakers of thy bounty, we may in our particular orbit give out life and light, sustenance and joy to them that revolve about us, without diminution of substance or effulgence forever. More secret and most holy, source of light, source of light, source of love, source of liberty, be thou ever constant and mighty in earth, source of energy, fire of motion, with diligence and ever labor with thee, that we may remain in thine abundance, And the old man